The first drop of rain hit the stage like a warning. At first, no one noticed. The air above Berlin's Olympic Stadium shimmered with electricity. 70,000 people packed shoulder to shoulder beneath the towering lights, chanting one name, over and over again, until it felt like the sound itself might split the sky. Michael, Michael, Michael. A tremor of thunder rolled above the steel rafters, low and distant, swallowed by the roar of the crowd. Then the music hit. You are not alone. The lights dimmed. A single spotlight cut through the darkness, and from the shadowed arch at center stage, he appeared. Michael Jackson. For a heartbeat, the world forgot to breathe. The cameras flashed so fast they looked like stars collapsing. The crowd's scream was not sound. It was energy. It surged through the air, through the rain, through every heartbeat in that stadium. The dancers froze mid-pose, the band locked in rhythm, and Michael stepped forward, every movement slow, deliberate, otherworldly. White shirt, black slacks, hair damp from the mist, a gloved hand gripping the microphone as if it were the only thing keeping the night alive. Another day has gone. His voice, soft, pure, trembling slightly with echo, rippled through the speakers. The crowd responded instantly, thousands of hands waving in unison, a living ocean of devotion. The sound rose, crashed, and fell in rhythm with his song. The rain began to come faster now, a fine mist turning into steady drops that shimmered under the floodlights like falling diamonds. But he didn't stop. He never did. Michael's voice only grew stronger, carrying across the storm, fusing with the sound of thunder as if the sky itself had joined the performance. Stagehands moved like ghosts behind him, covering equipment, checking monitors, whispering orders into earpieces. But Michael was lost in the music, lost in the exchange between his heart and the sea of faces before him. Then it happened. Halfway through the chorus, "You are not alone." His eyes shifted. It wasn't random. It wasn't the usual sweep of performers scanning the crowd. It was sudden, sharp, as if something invisible had reached out and tugged his attention toward one specific place near the front barricade. The cameras caught it, that small, subtle pause. His body went still mid-step. The rain fell heavier now, tapping against his face, running down the collar of his shirt, but he didn't blink. He was staring into the crowd, past the lights, past the chaos. At someone, a young woman, maybe 19, pressed against the barrier. Her face was pale, drenched, her hands trembling as she held up a small, white sign that shimmered in the storm. The ink was bleeding from the rain, but the words were still visible. "You saved my life, Michael." For a long moment, everything stopped. The dancers froze, unsure if this was part of the choreography. The band faltered slightly, instruments holding a single note in the air. The crowd sensed it too, that the energy had changed, and the screams began to fade into confused murmurs. Michael's chest rose and fell. The rain was heavier now, soaking his hair until it clung to his cheeks. His hand lowered slowly from the microphone. The spotlight glared against his wet shirt, making him glow like something fragile and human at the same time. And then he smiled. It wasn't the polished, rehearsed grin that had graced magazine covers for decades. It was faint, trembling, uncertain. It was a kind of smile that comes from somewhere deeper than words, something that belonged not to Michael Jackson, the superstar, but to Michael, the man who had just recognized something real in a sea of strangers. The girl gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. She started to cry, not the kind of tears that came from fandom, but the kind that come when someone finally sees you. That single, small smile spread like wildfire. Fans who couldn't see what it caused it screamed louder, sensing that something extraordinary had just happened. The air changed again, electric, reverent. 1,000 cell phone flashes lit the stadium like lightning. Michael blinked, breaking the spell. He stepped back to the microphone, lips parting as if to resume the song, but his voice caught. For half a beat, he said nothing. The band, unsure, stumbled to fill the silence with soft instrumentation. Finally, his voice returned, softer now, almost like a whisper carried by the rain. "But you're not alone." The words came out different this time, not performed, not projected, spoken, as if meant only for her. The rest of the song flowed like water, slower, gentler, more fragile. When it ended, there was no grand pose, no dance finale, only stillness. He stood there in the rain, eyes closed, lips trembling, before whispering something that the microphone barely caught. "Thank you." He lowered his head. The audience erupted, not the usual hysteria, but a wave of raw emotion. People were crying, hugging, shouting his name like it meant more than just fandom. Cameras panned across faces streaked with rain and tears. Michael turned once more toward the section of the crowd where the girls stood, his eyes soft, almost searching, and then he walked off stage. The lights dimmed. The music faded. The show ended abruptly, 5 minutes early. Backstage, the crew scrambled. Some thought he was ill. Others thought the weather had forced an early stop. But Michael said nothing. He walked straight past the security team, through the corridor lined with cables and flight cases, his drenched shirt clinging to his chest. "Michael," his stage manager called, "do you want to towel off before the next?" Michael stopped walking. He turned slightly, his voice low but clear. She was there. "Who?" "The girl." "What girl?" He looked down, the faintest smile still on his lips, though his eyes looked distant, somewhere far beyond the walls of the stadium. "The one I smiled at," he whispered. "She was there. I've seen her before." He walked into his dressing room, closed the door, and for a long time, no one heard a sound. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The story didn't start in Berlin. It started in a small hospital room in Madrid, 2 years earlier, where a teenage girl stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between 4 drips, praying to make it to her next birthday. Her name was Sofia Alvarez. At 17, she had been a dancer, the kind who couldn't walk down the street without moving to the rhythm of life around her. Music wasn't a hobby, it was oxygen. She would blast Billie Jean through the paper-thin walls of her family's apartment, spinning across the floor barefoot, her laughter echoing over her mother's scolding. She was supposed to audition for a scholarship program in London, but life had other plans. Leukemia, stage 3, 1 word, and the world stopped dancing. For months, her days were measured not in choreography, but in blood tests. Her mirror became the enemy. Her hair fell out in strands. Her skin turned ghostly pale. Her body, once fluid and free, was trapped beneath tubes and hospital sheets. But she still had Michael. Every day, her mother would bring a battered cassette player and a small stack of tapes. Dangerous. History. Off the wall. Sometimes the nurses would roll their eyes at the noise, but they always smiled when Sofia sang along. Even when she was too weak to move, her fingers would tap against the blanket, following the beat. Her favorite song was Heal the World. She said it didn't sound like a pop song. It sounded like a prayer. On her darkest nights, when the pain clawed through her chest and morphine wasn't enough, she'd close her eyes and imagine herself standing at one of his concerts, surrounded by lights, music, and people who understood what it meant to feel alive. Her doctors didn't expect her to survive that winter, but she did. And when the next year came, she fought harder. Round after round of chemo, endless nausea, hair regrowth that came in like fine ash. Every milestone, every small miracle, she marked with Michael's music. When her white blood cell count improved, she made a promise to herself. If I get out of here, if I get one more chance to dance, I'll see him live. That promise kept her going. 2 years later, June 1997, Sofia was 19. Her hair had grown back. Not long, but thick enough to twist into a ponytail. Her body was weak, but her spirit was restless. When Michael announced his History World Tour stop in Berlin, Sofia's mother, who worked double shifts as a hotel maid, used nearly all their savings to buy 2 tickets. "Are you sure?" Sofia had whispered when her mother showed her the envelope. Her mother smiled through tired eyes. "You spent 2 years fighting to live, Hija. Now it's time to live." The day of the concert, Sofia wore a red scarf over her shoulders, a gift from her father before he died in a construction accident when she was 10. Around her wrist, she tied a hospital bracelet she never took off, a silent reminder where she'd come from. In her hands, she carried a simple white sign she'd painted that morning with shaky hands. "You saved my life, Michael." She wasn't trying to be dramatic. It was the truth. They arrived hours before the gates opened. The stadium loomed like a metallic mountain, trembling with bass tests and distant cheers. When security finally let them in, Sophia could hardly walk. Every step sent pain through her legs. But when she saw the stage, that vast cathedral of light and sound, something inside her ignited. As the crowd surged forward, she held her mother's hand, pressing herself against the barricade until she could see the front monitors. The air smelled of rain, sweat, and ozone. The speakers throbbed with anticipation. When the lights dimmed, the crowd exploded. Sophia screamed, a sound she didn't even know she was capable of making anymore. Her mother laughed through tears. Then the first chords of You Are Not Alone echoed through the stadium. And there he was. Michael Jackson stepped into the light like a vision. Every movement was deliberate, every note filled with emotion. His presence was both electric and gentle, commanding yet fragile, like he carried the weight of every soul in the audience. Sophia's breath caught. She could feel her heart pounding in her throat. Every lyric pierced her. But you are not alone. I am here with you. And she believed it. Every word, every syllable. Because for 2 years, those words had been her lifeline. Halfway through the song, the sky opened. Rain began to fall in silver sheets, turning the stadium into a sea of flickering reflections. Fans screamed and held up jackets. But Sophia didn't move. She tilted her face upward, letting the rain mix with her tears. Her mother tried to cover her with a plastic poncho, but Sophia shook her head. No, she said softly. Let me feel it. Michael kept singing, his voice echoing across the thunder. And then it happened. For one impossible moment, his eyes met hers. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't coincidence. The spotlight swept across the crowd, caught the glint of her wet red scarf, and stopped. Michael's gaze locked onto hers. Her knees nearly gave out. She gripped the barricade to steady herself, her chest tight with disbelief. He wasn't just looking, he was seeing. In that instant, the noise, the rain, the world, everything disappeared. It was just her and him. And then, softly, he smiled. It was small, faint, almost hesitant, but real. So real that she could feel like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Sophia covered her mouth, sobbing. Her mother put a trembling hand on her shoulder, whispering, He sees you, Mija. He sees you. When the concert ended, Sophia didn't cheer. She stood in silence, clutching her sign, afraid to blink and lose the memory. People around her were crying, shouting, taking photos, but she felt something different. Stillness. Peace. As they left the stadium, her mother noticed something strange. Sophia wasn't limping anymore. Her pain, which had plagued her for months, seemed gone. That night, back at the hotel, Sophia couldn't sleep. She replayed the moment over and over, his expression, the faint curve of his lips, the compassion in his eyes. She didn't need an autograph. She didn't need a photo. That smile was enough. She wrote him a letter that night. Dear Michael, I was the girl in the red scarf tonight. You smiled at me. You probably don't remember, but I will never forget. You made me believe that living was worth fighting for. Thank you for seeing me. Love, Sophia. She sealed it in an envelope, intending to mail it to his fan club in Los Angeles. But before she could, a knock came at their hotel door the next morning. 2 security officers in black suits stood there, holding a folded note. One of them said softly, Mr. Jackson would like to see you. Sophia froze. Her mother covered her mouth. The note was short, for words, written in delicate, unmistakable handwriting. I saw your sign. The morning air in Berlin was cool and silver, carrying the faint hum of traffic from the streets below. The rain from last night still clung to the windows in streaks, and somewhere far off, church bells rang to the city like a soft echo of hope. Sophia Alvarez sat frozen on the edge of her hotel bed, the note trembling in her hands. Her mother stood by the window, clutching the curtain as if to steady herself, her lips whispering a silent prayer. Outside the door, 2 men in black suits waited patiently. They wore discreet earpieces, and though they smiled, their posture radiated authority. One of them spoke in accented English. Miss Alvarez, Mr. Jackson would like to meet you privately, if you feel well enough. Sophia's voice caught in her throat. H.E., you want to see me? Why? The man exchanged a small smile with his colleague. He didn't say, only that it was important. Her mother turned, eyes wide. Are you sure this is safe? My daughter. She's still recovering. The first man nodded gently. Mrs. Alvarez, I assure you, Mr. Jackson just wants to talk. You'll both be escorted. Sophia's pulse thundered in her ears. She could barely breathe. She looked down at the folded note again, the elegant handwriting that didn't feel real. I saw your sign. Her hand was shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. 20 minutes later, they were escorted to a private corridor beneath the Grand Hyatt Berlin. The hallway was lined with black curtains and silver flight cases marked MJ Productions. The muffled thrum of equipment being packed up echoed around them, last night's show already fading into memory. When they reached a heavy wooden door guarded by 2 more men, Sophia's heart felt like it might stop. One of the guards tapped his earpiece. We're here. The door opened slowly. The first thing she noticed was a scent, a mix of sandalwood, stage makeup, and something faintly sweet, like roses left in the rain. Then she saw him. Michael Jackson stood by the window, gazing out at the city skyline. His reflection shimmered faintly in the glass, the pale morning light outlining his frame. He was dressed simply, a black silk shirt, dark pants, and his signature armband. His hair, still damp from the earlier shower, curled slightly around his temples. When the door closed behind them, he turned, and for the first time, Sophia saw his eyes up close. They weren't the eyes of the legend from posters or videos. They were softer, sadder, deep brown, almost gentle, the eyes of someone who had seen both the best and worst of humanity. Hi, he said quietly. His voice was lighter than she expected, almost fragile. You must be Sophia. Her breath hitched. Why, yes, Mr. Jackson. He smiled faintly and shook his head. Michael, just Michael, please. He crossed the room slowly, every movement graceful, like a dancer even in stillness. He stopped a few feet away, studying her face with quiet intensity. You were in the front row last night. Sophia nodded, her throat tight. Yes. I saw your sign. Her mother, unable to speak, stepped forward and whispered. She made it herself. All night she talked about it. About you. Michael's expression softened. I know. That's why I wanted to see her. He looked back at Sophia. You said, I saved your life. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. She nodded. You did. How? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. When I got sick, I couldn't dance anymore. The doctor said I might not live to see my 18th birthday. There were nights I wanted to give up. But your music, it kept me alive. Heal the world. Stranger in Moscow, will you be there? Every song felt like a message, like you were singing to me. Michael blinked slowly, listening. I told myself, she continued, if I ever got out of that hospital, I'd see you perform. Just once. That was my dream. And last night, she hesitated, her voice breaking, you looked at me. You smiled. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a patient. I felt human again. Silence filled the room, the kind that feels sacred. Michael looked down, his hand covering his mouth. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked with emotion. You know, people think concerts are about applause, he said softly, about fame. But sometimes it's about one person. Just one. And last night, that was you. Sophia's tears fell freely now. Michael took a small step forward. You're brave, he whispered. Braver than most people I've ever met. You fought through something that would break others, and you still found a way to smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper, water-stained at the edges. I found this backstage, he said, handing it to her. It was her sign. The rain had nearly destroyed it, the ink bleeding into itself, but the words were still legible. You saved my life, Michael. She gasped. You kept it? He smiled. Of course. I keep everything that reminds me why I do this. Sophia looked down at the ruined paper in her trembling hands. "It's all wet." Michael laughed softly, a sound so rare, so human, it made her heart ache. "So am I most nights." Her mother laughed through tears. For a few minutes, they all just stood there, three people connected by something invisible but real. The silence wasn't awkward. It was healing. Then Michael turned toward a table and picked up something wrapped in white silk. He unfolded it carefully. Inside was a small silver pendant shaped like a heart, engraved with two words, "Keep believing." "I designed this a long time ago," he said. "Whenever I meet someone who reminds me what love looks like, I give it to them." He placed it gently in Sophia's palm. "This belongs to you now." She couldn't speak. She only nodded, clutching the pendant as tears streamed down her cheeks. Michael took a step back, his expression full of quiet reverence. "Promise me something, Sophia. Anything. Keep dancing, even if it's just in your heart, even when no one's watching." Her mother sobbed softly. "She will." Michael smiled again, that same faint, fragile smile from the concert, but warmer now. "Then my job is done." He glanced toward his assistant by the door. "Could you take a picture for her?" Sophia froze. "A picture?" Michael nodded. "Something to remember this day." They stood together, Michael, Sophia, and her mother, as the flash went off. In the photo, Sophia's eyes were red from crying, Michael's shirt still damp from the rain, but both of them were smiling, not as performer and fan, but as two souls who had seen each other. Before she left, Michael whispered something just for her. "Whenever you hear thunder," he said, "remember, it's just the sky keeping rhythm for you." Sophia didn't understand it fully then, but years later, she would. As the door closed behind her, Michael turned back to window. He held the photo the photographer had just printed from a Polaroid camera. He traced Sophia's face with his thumb. "She's why I keep doing this," he murmured. And somewhere outside, faintly, the sky rumbled again, like applause from the heavens. The world kept spinning, but for Michael Jackson, something in Berlin had shifted forever. In the weeks that followed the concert, his schedule moved like a blur. London, Copenhagen, Warsaw, Amsterdam. City after city, crowd after crowd, each show more massive than the last. But in the quiet moments between the noise, when the applause faded and the hotel rooms turned cold, he found himself thinking of her, Sophia, the girl with the red scarf and trembling hands, the one who smiled through rain and sickness and still had the strength to say thank you. He carried the memory like a song that wouldn't leave his head. It wasn't the usual fan interaction, the autographs, the screams, the adoration. It was something purer, smaller, infinitely more human. Every night before he went on stage, he would check his pocket, and there it was, her ruined sign, folded neatly inside a protective plastic sleeve. "You saved my life, Michael." He had started carrying it with him, tucked into his jacket beside the stage set list. When he touched it, it grounded him, reminded him why the music mattered. 2 months later, after the tour's European leg ended, Michael returned to his ranch in California. Neverland was quiet that season, unusually quiet. The fountains were off. The laughter of visiting children was replaced by silence. He spent most mornings walking through the garden with his assistant Bill Bray, humming melodies to himself. But one morning, as the mail cart rolled up the driveway, something caught his eye. A thick white envelope, slightly bent at the corner, marked with a Madrid postmark. The handwriting was neat but shaky, the ink smudged as if by tears. He took it without a word, excused himself, and walked down to the lakeside gazebo. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine. Birds rustled in the trees. Michael sat down on a marble bench, turned the envelope over, and saw the sender's name, Sofia Alvarez. He stared at it for a long time before carefully opening it. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small photograph, the one they had taken together that morning in Berlin. The paper trembled in his hands as he began to read. "Dear Michael, it's been 2 months since Berlin, and I still don't know how to find the right words. That night changed everything. I wanted you to know that I'm still fighting. My doctors say I'm doing better than expected, that the illness is in remission. But I don't think it's just medicine that's keeping me here. I think it's music. You told me to keep dancing, even if it's just in my heart. I do that every day. When I get tired or scared, I remember your smile, not the one from the magazines, but the one you gave me, the one that made me believe I was still alive. I wear the pen you gave me every night before bed. It helps me sleep without fear. Thank you for seeing me, for reminding me that even the smallest light can keep the dark away. If you ever wonder whether your music still matters, it does. It saved one girl who was ready to give up. Love always, Sophia. By the time he finished reading, Michael's hands were shaking. The letter was smudged from where his tears had fallen. He folded it carefully and placed it beside her photograph. For a long while, he just sat there, looking out at the still surface of the lake, remembering the sound of the Berlin rain. Then he stood up, walked into the house, and called his manager. Cancel everything for the next 3 days. Everything, Michael? Yes, he said. Everything. He didn't explain why. He didn't have to. 2 days later, a car pulled up in a narrow street in Madrid. Inside, Michael sat in the back seat, wearing a simple disguise, baseball cap, glasses, scarf, accompanied by his longtime security aide and translator. They stopped outside a small dance studio called Escuela de Movimiento. The walls were faded, the sign half broken, but through the window he could see a handful of young people rehearsing barefoot on wooden floors. Among them, Sophia. Her movements were slower now, more careful, but every turn, every sway carried something raw, something transcendent. She wasn't just dancing. She was surviving. Michael stood in the doorway, silently, watching. He didn't interrupt. He didn't call her name. He just watched as she moved a man in the mirror, playing softly through a crackling speaker. When the song ended, Sophia noticed him. She froze mid-turn, her breath catching. "Michael," she whispered. The studio went still. The others stared, unsure if they were dreaming. Michael smiled faintly and held up a finger to his lips, a quiet gesture of humility. "You kept your promise," he said softly. Sophia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "You came." He shrugged gently. "You wrote me first." The others in the room slowly backed away, giving them space. For a few seconds, it was just them again, two people in the eye of a storm, surrounded by quiet understanding. He reached out and handed her something, a small velvet box. "I was going to mail this," he said, "but something should be delivered in person." Inside was a silver bracelet engraved with 2 words, "Still dancing." Sophia's hands trembled as she picked it up. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," he said softly. "Just keep doing what you're doing. You don't owe me anything. You already gave me more than you know." "What do you mean?" He took a slow breath, glancing around the old studio. The cracked mirrors, the dust, the light streaming in through broken blinds. "Every time I go on stage, I wonder if what I do still means something. Berlin reminded me that it does. You reminded me." Tears filled Sophia's eyes again, but this time they weren't from sadness. They were from gratitude, the kind that comes from realizing you've touched someone you thought was untouchable. "Michael," she whispered, "I thought I was the one you saved." He smiled, that same faint, knowing smile. Maybe we saved each other. They talked for almost an hour, mostly about life, music, and faith. Sophia told him about her dream, to teach dance to children who couldn't afford lessons. Michael told her about his hopes for a world where kindness was currency. When it was time to leave, he hugged her gently, whispering something in Spanish that made her cry even harder. "Sigu bailando, pequeña, tu corazón tiene ritmo." Keep dancing, little one. Your heart has rhythm. He left as quietly as he came, disappearing into the sunlight. But for Sophia, that morning would replay in her memory for the rest of her life. The day Michael Jackson came not as an icon, but as a man who understood what it meant to truly see someone. Back in Los Angeles, a few months later, Michael sat in his studio, working on what would become a new song. It wasn't about fame or charts or sales. It was about one moment, one smile, one connection that changed 2 lives. He titled it simply, "The Girl in the Front Row." And though it was never officially released, the demo's haunting lyrics lived on, a quiet secret shared only among those who knew the truth. Time moved on, as it always does. But some moments refuse to fade. They linger, echoing to the years like a melody that never quite ends. For Michael Jackson, the smile he shared with Sofia Alvarez in that rain-soaked Berlin stadium was one of those moments. It became something sacred, a quiet reminder of what his music was meant to do long before the lights, the headlines, or the chaos. He carried her letter everywhere, folded, worn, soft at the edges, on the nights when the noise of the world grew too loud, when critics barked, when tabloids lied, when loneliness pressed against the walls of his mind. He'd open that letter and read it again. You made me believe that living was worth fighting for. Those words were stronger than applause, more healing than fame. In 2008, a full decade after that night in Berlin, Sofia stood outside a quiet cemetery in Madrid. The air was crisp with the scent of wet earth, a drizzle falling over the marble headstones. In her hand, she held a bouquet of white lilies and a folded photograph, the one taken in Berlin, where she stood beside Michael, her eyes red from crying, his arm draped gently over her shoulder. A lot had changed since then. Sofia was now 29, a dance instructor at a community center for children with chronic illnesses. Her body bore the faint scars of her battle. A thin line on her arm, a faint pallor to her skin, but her eyes burned with life. Around her neck hung the silver pendant he'd given her years ago. Keep believing. She'd kept her promise. She had never stopped dancing. As she set the flowers down on the grave of another patient she'd lost, a little boy named Luis, she whispered softly, "Keep dancing up there, okay? The sky needs more rhythm." Then she looked up, watching the drizzle turn to sunlight. For a moment, she thought she heard something, faint, distant, almost like a rhythm carried on the wind. A heartbeat later, a news alert buzzed on her phone. She opened it, and the headline made her knees buckle. Breaking news. Michael Jackson has died at age 50. The phone slipped from her hand and hit the ground. Her chest constricted. For a moment, the world tilted, blurred. "No," she whispered. No, that can't be right." But it was. The whole world stopped that day. Streets filled with mourning crowds. Radio stations across continents played Man in the Mirror and Heal the World on repeat. Candlelight vigils stretched from Los Angeles to Tokyo. Millions wept for a man they never truly knew, but had somehow always loved. But for Sofia, it wasn't the loss of an idol. It was the loss of someone who had seen her. Someone who had looked through the noise of fame and found a fragile girl in the rain. And smiled. She sat on the cold stone bench outside the cemetery for hours, tears soaking through her scarf, unable to move. Then, through the static haze of grief, she remembered his words. "Whenever you hear thunder, it's just the sky keeping rhythm for you." And that night, when the storm rolled over Madrid, Sofia stepped outside into the rain, barefoot, trembling, and danced. A year later, Sofia received a letter. It was postmarked from Los Angeles, sent by the Michael Jackson estate. Inside was a typed note and a small flash drive. The note read, "Dear Ms. Alvarez, Mr. Jackson often spoke about you. He kept your letter and photograph in his private collection at Neverland Ranch. Among his personal files, we found an unreleased demo titled The Girl in the Front Row." His handwritten note beside it read, "Inspired by Sofia, the girl who reminded me to believe again. We thought you should have it. Sincerely, the estate team." Her hands shook as she plugged the flash drive into her old laptop. There was one file, Deadland Thefren Trondisker demo.wave. She clicked play. A soft piano melody began, tender, haunting. Then came his voice. She stood in the rain, her heart on display, a whisper of hope in a world gone gray. I smiled at her once, and the sky broke through, 'cause the music she heard was a love I knew. Sofia pressed a hand over her mouth. His voice, fragile, pure, aching with sincerity, filled the small apartment. She cried silently as the song continued, her tears falling onto the keyboard. By the end of the track, Michael's voice faded into silence, but not before he spoke softly, almost like a message left for her alone. "For the girl who reminded me to feel again, thank you." 5 years later, Sofia founded the Front Row Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to granting terminally ill children their dream of seeing their favorite performer live, inspired by her own encounter with Michael. The foundation's motto was taken directly from the bracelet he'd given her. Still dancing. Every concert ticket, every hospital visit, every wish fulfilled bore those 2 words. Under her leadership, the foundation grew worldwide. Artists from across genres, from Beyoncé to Ed Sheeran, joined the mission. They performed private shows for children who couldn't leave their hospital beds, sent messages, donated instruments, and even joined Sophia's annual gala, held every June 18th, the anniversary of that Berlin night. At every gala, she told the same story. Not about fame, not about celebrity, but about a single smile in the rain, one moment of recognition between a performer and a girl who refused to stop believing. On the 10th anniversary of Michael's death, Sophia stood on stage at the Foundation's charity concert in London. She was older now, her hair streaked with silver, her voice stronger than ever. Behind her, on a massive screen, a single black and white photo appeared. Michael Jackson mid-performance, smiling faintly under the rain. She looked out over the audience, thousands of faces lit by candlelight, and took a breath. When I was 17, she began softly, I was dying. And then one man looked into the crowd and saw me, just for a second. But in that second, everything changed. I learned that sometimes all it takes to save someone is to see them. The crowd was silent. Some were crying. Others were holding candles shaped like silver hearts. Sophia reached into her pocket and pulled out the pendant he'd given her all those years ago. Keep believing. She held it up to the light. This, she said, is why we're here. Because kindness doesn't die. Music doesn't die. Love doesn't die. It only changes its rhythm. The audience erupted in applause. As the music swelled, a familiar thunder rumbled outside. Rain began to fall softly against the glass dome of the arena. Sophia looked up, smiling. Do you hear that? She whispered. He's keeping rhythm. The lights dimmed. On the screen behind her, a video began to play. Old concert footage of Michael performing You Are Not Alone. Sophia stepped forward barefoot and began to dance. Her movements were gentle, fluid, filled with grace. The audience watched in awe as her silhouette moved in harmony with Michael's on the screen. And for one breathtaking moment, time folded in on itself, the living and the gone moving together to the same beat. When the music ended, the crowd rose to their feet. Tears, applause, reverence. Sophia bowed her head, whispering to the microphone, Thank you, Michael. Later that night, when the arena had emptied and the rain had stopped, she stood alone on the stage. The floor lights glowed softly beneath her feet. She closed her eyes and listened. A faint rumble echoed in the distance, not thunder this time, but something gentler, a vibration, a pulse. She smiled faintly, whispering into the quiet, still dancing. And somewhere, in memory, in music, in the hearts of millions, so was he. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.